Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. And you should see it now. Okay, let me switch to the presentation mode. Okay, so this is our agenda. We'll do quick intros, then we'll set up the problem, and we'll talk about the solution, and then we'll demo. We'll have live demo for that solution, and it all will take 30-35 minutes. And I hope that the rest of the time we'll spend on your questions. So my name is Julie Chudakova. I'm a product manager in Copilot acceleration team, and I work with customers bringing their scenarios to Copilot. And today's topic is one of the patterns that we observe. And co-presenting with me is Eric Scherlinger. He's our principal architect. Eric unblocks customers on their authentication setup journey and in general advises on the architecture, any architecture issues that customers are facing. Okay, let's go. So the topic is bringing customer-built AI agent to M365 Copilot. So why to bring your AI agent into Copilot? So the common themes that we are hearing from customers is that customers, they build their own AI agent on some platform outside of Copilot. And business is asking next next question, how can we use it in Copilot? Because that's where all the users are, and we don't want to rebuild it from scratch on Copilot. Another thing is that some companies choose it as a strategic move to have Copilot as a unified experience for all the AI assistants that they build across the teams. And not the least is that factor that with that integration, you get all the security, compliance, and governance standards that comes with Microsoft platforms. And what it looks like on the ground is that customers are asking, so we built our AI assistant, how we can bring it to Copilot, right? And if we look at different industries, in manufacturing, it could look like we built a downtime agent that helps diagnose some machine issues based on the manuals and some sensor logs. And engineers are using teams to coordinate the fixes. How can we bring that agent into teams so that engineers don't spend time switching tools, right, when they lose time and money? Or for financial services, it can be similarly, we have an AI agent that answers some policy questions. And the managers are working in M365 apps, and they don't want to have another portal to work with the agent. And as I mentioned, it can be just a strategy inside the company to use central place, a central experience, and like a single front door for all the AI assistants built, and companies strategically choose Copilot for this. And what enables all of this to become a reality is what we call a proxy agent. And this is just to set up some context for the live demo that Eric will walk us through. Here on the left, you see that existing AI investments that the customer might have, right? They build an AI agent on an existing platform or their custom stack. They might have a web UI, custom web UI, and users working with that backend through that custom web UI. And on the right, it's M365 Copilot. And what Proxy Agent is bringing is this part in the middle, the wiring that actually allows users to connect to through M365 Copilot to an existing agent. And what we are presenting today is the solution that is fully automated, and there is a number of templates that are used, and Derek will talk about it in more details right now. But the idea is that it's just a thin relay and just a transparent layer that allows you, that handles all the auth and streaming and transfers between Copilot and your agent. Your agent is intact, and the proxy agent only forwards the messages and receives the answers from your agent. Eric, if you want to take it from here, it's basically the another view of the same components, just saying that this part is operated by Microsoft, and this part is what you have to handle. And yes, you can take over and talk about those components. Yeah, and you will need to, I will stop sharing.
Yeah, let me take over then. Yeah. So as Julie was mentioning, we very early heard the signals from customers that they wanted to take their existing investment, bringing into M365 Copilot, but keep their branding and as well keep the content intact and not being reprocessed by any AI in the mix. So that's why we created the architecture pattern of the proxy agent. So it's really acting as a proxy. We shipped it as a sample because to make it work, actually, there is a bit of complexity as there are multiple bricks from the Microsoft stack that needs to be configured right to make it happen. So obviously we have a user that's signing in the M365 cloud, so it might be in M365 Copilot or in Teams because those two channels are very similar. We have a bot service which serve as a registrar. Essentially, it enables you to make the translation between your agent and its identity to your backend, which is hosting the proxy agent, essentially speaking. It's also serve as an authentication cache, which speed up the process so you don't re-authenticate every time, and you have a Microsoft managed service that handle that for you. And then obviously we have the proxy agent, which
Eric,
is
we can't see your screen.
Oh, it's not working. Okay.
It's showing black.
Let me try again. I might have to rejoin. I'm really sorry about that, Darian.
I know
I think
we'll work around it.
Yeah. Or maybe Julie, do you mind sharing? Well, no, let me restart it. It's gonna be faster. I'm really sorry.
Try sharing, and I will share if it doesn't work.
I'm back. Let me share my screen again. Hopefully it works a bit better. Yes, thumbs up if you can see the screen. All good. Thanks. So as I was saying, multiple components needs to work together, and I covered the bot service, which is sitting right at the middle, which is really serving as a registrar, very similar to a DNS server. On one end, you have your agent identity. On the other end, you have the service that's hosting the agent, and the bot service really serve to that purpose. It doesn't carry or traverse any message against common knowledge on that. And that's why as well that service is actually free on the Azure side. So depending your hosting thing, you are forced to have the Azure bot service configured, but the rest of the architecture could be hosted outside of Azure without any cost. So that as well an important part, as I'm rephrasing what I said a minute ago. And the proxy agent, which is built using the Microsoft 365 agent SDK under the single sign-on, which is kind of an heavy lift because our platform can be complex to set up. It's under the streaming and as well connecting to your AI agent, which is built somewhere else. The sample we're shipping is using Microsoft Foundry as a backend because it was very simple for us to spin up an agent, and I'm going to use that to demo to do the demo. But don't be don't take it the wrong way. The idea is to be able to use that sample to be modified to connect to a long chain agent or any other agent that would be hosted on another platform. Okay, so the sample really brings you the foundation and as well the automation to configure following some key principles that we wanted right from the start. We wanted to be production ready with zero trust, and as well provide some of the automation to help you automate that. Obviously, the sample assume that you're an administrator and can do anything, but actually you can take some of those as example or modify them as we go forward. On top of that, we do ship a skill which should be live a bit later this week that will help you on board with the sample, modify it and configure it going forward. Before moving to the demo itself, let me do a bit of a deep dive. So if you already found the sample on GitHub and are already familiar with that mermaid graph that is showing kind of the flow of a message coming from Copilot and going to your AI backend. So here you see the three main blocks that the proxy agent is actually delivering, which is first the SSO authentication, which is a few message exchange that are happening between the user that's sitting in Copilot, for example, the Azure bot service, the proxy agent. The flow is very simple. Step 0, we check if we haven't cached the user credentials through an access token. If the cache is empty, we then send a request back to the user to ask for an access token, which is access as a user. It's an interim token, part of the zero trust, which enable us to have a token representing the user with zero permission. And that's what exchange from the client side to the backend. And then we leverage the Azure bot service, but that's not mandatory. But in our case, for the demo purpose, it's really interesting to exchange that access as a token to a more privileged token that enable us to call our backend. As we're using AI Foundry or Microsoft Foundry, in that sample, we exchange that access as a user to a user impersonation token with the Azure bot service. And all that is done with a single line of code, just by putting the connection string that was automatically configured by the sample and the different scripts that are available. Obviously, the purpose of the skill I was mentioning is to explain you all the building blocks and so on, but it's fairly interesting as well to see the value of those SDKs, because for those that have been developing On the team side, for example, doing SSO used to be much more than one line of code. The second part of that sample is the streaming. Because we working in the AI world, streaming is mandatory because processing takes too long. And so we need to keep the user entertained to show him wait a message in a sense, and as well display the answer as gets generated. So that's done along your code using two methods: the queue informative update that enable you to send a waiter message that will show up in the Copilot UI or the Teams UI as something is happening. And then you have another method that I'm not showing in the screenshot, but also visible further down the road in the sample to start streaming the response as we're receiving it from the AI backend. And last but not the least, it's the step of connecting to your backend and sending the user prompt back to it. So in the sample with the Azure AI Foundry thing, we create a client and then we use that client to send the message, and then we stream back the response to the user. Obviously, depending on your AI backend, that might definitely be different. And that's the part where you will need to code to adapt the sample. Okay, so that's really the big building blocks of that sample. Let me stop presenting and move to a bit more live demo, so it's nicer. That solution is actually integrated in what we call the Microsoft 365 Agent Toolkit. It's a Visual VS Code extension that enables you to build AI agent a bit simply by scaffolding the project and automating through scripts a lot of the steps. So we decided to actually infuse those samples directly there. So if you click that M365 Agent Toolkit, you have a view sample and you find our sample, which is available today in Node.js, in Python, and in C#. C# is a bit lower down in the view, but all those three languages are now available through that. You just need to select, click create, and it will clone the repo for you, and you'll be ready. Obviously, for sake of time, I already pre-cloned the sample, so I can do some working demo and so on. Once you cloned, you'll be able to use the agent toolkit to sign into your environment. So I'm connected to my demo tenant. And then you have two ways of running that sample, local. So you don't have to host anything on Azure except the Azure bot service. Or you have a dev environment that actually upload the code into an app service in Azure. And we automate all the deployment from the creation of the different resources to the upload of the code on that backend, and as well packaging the Teams app or the Copilot app and siloing it into the environment. That's really the value prop of the agent toolkit in VS Code. For that part, it's gone through the different lifecycle options, but today the purpose is not really to give you a full presentation of the agent toolkit, so let's get back to our sample. So I did pre-create a few things. The first things you need to do is to, if you want to run with that sample as is, you need to have a Foundry deployment. In that Foundry deployment, you need to create an agent. And for demo's sake, and to show something that's a bit more end-to-end, I did pre-configure a SharePoint connector, so I can use SharePoint as a grounding and showcase that actually my user identity is used to connect to Foundry, and then Foundry used that same identity to talk to SharePoint to ask for some grounding to build a response back to the user. Okay, so that's the value prop of that sample out of the box. Obviously, that would need to be adapted to your scenario based on that. The rest of the deployment is fully automated. When you click provision, it will ask you to create a resource group. That's the one I created a few minutes ago, and it will create all the resources that are needed. Okay, it will create the Azure bot service registration, it will create the app service, it would create a managed identity because we don't want to use actually client ID and client secret, and we wanted to demonstrate that you can fully deploy a solution without having any secrets in your code or in your deployment. So there is no key vault because there is no secret to store there. Okay, and it's also going to Entra ID, which I closed. No, here it is. And creating an app registration, which is called suffix with user authentication, because it's really an app registration, which is dedicated to user authorization and does all the prereqs config, which setting up the permission, exposing an API, pre-authorizing a bunch of clients, and so on. So as you see, there are a lot of steps that are actually delivered by the sample. All the steps are automated through steps, which are available in the infra step, and that are automatically run when you use the agent toolkit. Okay? So let's go back to our scenario. Here, I'm connected in actually Copilot Studio, in Visual Studio Code. So I already run the deployment because it takes a few minutes and didn't want to waste the time. So I have my agent in M365 Copilot, and I can say hello, which is not super value prop, but always good to check that our agent is actually working. So the lining things up, the first waiter message that is actually generated by the system. And as you can see, there were multiple updates that were sent to us through that streaming UI I was mentioning. While I was saying all that, I was silently SSO to the backend, and my message was sent to AI from Microsoft Foundry and responds to me. So the hello response is very simple. Next, do something a bit more complex. Can you tell me what is our travel policy? And that's essentially the triggers that force my agent to do a SharePoint search, take that grounding and responds back to the question using a few citations there. And here I'm getting a response with a few sources. We have a limitation at the minute that's not handling correctly the citation, which will be part of the work of adapting that sample because every platform has a different way to handle those citations and to be translated. And that's why we have the actual skill that's here to explain you how the sample works, but as well guide you into the different modification you would need to get started here. I will present that in a minute. But here I did get my response automatically from the agent with a few citations which are not clickable at the minute, which are coming from that agent thing. The way to check it, I can go through the different logs. Well, let me refresh that page because I've been idle for some time. I'm connected to the agent 600. I can click the logs and I'm not seeing my other logs, which is a good demo scenario. Thought I was able to see those. I was a minute ago. Interesting. Should I be clicking here and see my thread? Yes, I am. Here it is. So that's the log I just run. I believe here it is. And I can click try to playground and see that session log that just happened. And if I click thread logs, actually I see the different steps that happen. So I said, can you tell me about the travel policy? The orchestrator decided to run a step that is actually calling the SharePoint grounding, translated my request to travel policy, got some document, and generated the response we actually saw into Copilot. So here you really have an end-to-end scenario of using the user identity from M365 Copilot up to the SharePoint retrieval API and back to you, having full end-to-end user configuration with zero trust, because there is no secrets that were used there. Okay, so that's it for the demo itself around how to use it. A few things that are interesting to know on that deployment. We pre-deploy the environment with application insights, so every actions that are done are actually logged, and it might be easier for you to actually debug and see what's going on into that deployment. So I love actually the application map, so you can see your application and what are the different bricks it's connecting to, and actually you can click on it and see the different messages that were used and what's going on there. Okay. Then I wanted to spend a bit more time on actually the skill, which is not yet fully released because it's stuck into a pull request, sorry, which will be released later this week, but I'm sure we will share with you the interim link to get it for the time being. So actually the skill is infused into the repo. So once you clone the repo, and if you use GitHub Copilot, you directly have access to that skill and its prereqs that are asked for you to install. And then you can start asking questions. Funny enough, just before running the session, I redeployed the sample, had a bug, and actually I fixed the bug using the skill. And I'm pushing an update to that to my demo environment, to the Git repo for it to be fixed. So that gives you as well the capability of even the skill being able to support the maker, which build the sample to fix the issue. So I thought it was kind of a good example of the skill. But another example of the skill would be to ask for explanation of the single sign-on, or maybe let's ask it a more realistic question. I need to secure the Proxy Agent. What are my options to not expose it directly to the internet? Because I guess a lot of customers don't like to have app service directly exposed on the internet and are asking to be on private network and so on. So if the skill is actually working correctly, the response is you can't publish it to a private network. You can, the API/messaging endpoint needs to be public. You can use an Azure front door or a WAF to secure it, an application manager. And you can use as well IP filtering to limit the inbound request to only the Microsoft IP address, which are provided here. So that's an example of how you can use the skill to help you onboard or even fix question, answer question, or move faster. Okay, you need maybe to have, can you show me a high-level architecture of the proxy. Oh. And you can even ask it to draw you architecture and so on. So in that case, it's using Excali draw, but could you also use Mermaid if it feels simpler for you as an output and generate all that for you. So as we infuse all that content into the skill, is knowledgeable about everything that's meaningful for the sample to work and to be usable there. At the minute, we gonna first ship the skill in Node.js, but we are in the process of translating it for the C# and the Python version. It's just that there are small nuances across language that we want to make sure that are right and don't hallucinate, because the purpose of the skill was to give you an AI assistant that would be trustworthy, as it's a very specific and brand new technology that's like a lot of documentation. So that's often what happens with AI. If it's not fully known, it's a bit more complex there. Okay. I'm checking quickly the chat to see if we have questions. Julie, if there are.
There is a question about
question.
Salesforce agent.
Salesforce agent?
Yes. Can the sample be used to bring Salesforce agent that is built on Agentforce?
That's a very good question. I would be, top of mind, I don't know, because I'm not very familiar with Agentforce. So the question I would have is, does Agentforce expose APIs we could use to connect to expose that Agentforce? Probably the response is yes. And if it's yes, then yes, indeed, we can change that. The way to change it is to ask the agent or do it yourself to update who you connect to that Salesforce agent using their SDK, because every vendor now expose an SDK, and then understand what are the methods to connect to the Salesforce agent. There might be some subtle trick into the authentication mechanism, or recommendation and the foundation is to use the Entra ID SSO end-to-end. That way you protect yourself from having, oversharing or over-actioning, rather than using service account or API keys. So that was really a strong opinion on your side when we build the sample. And then you need to understand, or you can send the prompt and stream back response into Copilot. There might be as well subtle differences in terms of the output appearance, because the M365 channel is very strict. Today we support text and markdown out of the box, and as well we have the capability to use adaptive cards to have a bit more structured approach. Those are the three outputs that are there that need to be there, and that's where you definitely want to use GitHub Copilot or Cloud Code, because the skill would work with both technology. We built it on purpose for that with the right model. In my case, as you can see, I'm using Cloud Opus 4.6, which is really good for that purpose, and gonna guide you through those. And probably those SDK are already known by the model, and so you'll be able to help you generate that code. So that would be the thing. I did saw a question very early on that I didn't talk. Who does the integration handle sensitive data securely? From Ashish. That's a very good question. At the minute, the way the M365 channel for Copilot does not support sensitivity labels. So when you're in Copilot, where is my Copilot window? It's over there. You have a shield here, and actually you can have it as well in response to display the sensitivity label of the content you're handling. Is not yet supported. It is a work in progress. It's gonna come hopefully a bit later this year throughout the summer with the file upload capabilities. Once we get file upload capabilities into the product for this kind of integration through Procode, we'll have the capability to set sensitivity labels for message, and those will be shown into the UI. You know, as we are just a proxy, we are not handling data per se. We're only showing what was done on the back end. So the idea is more having a mechanism to understand the sensitivity level of the content generated on your back end and being displayed correctly on the front end, which is M365 Copilot. Hopefully that's clear enough for you, Ashish. We definitely also want to update the sample once that technology is available, because all the customers we work with in the past with that technology were very expecting on the file upload capability. So that's a non-limitation. There is no possibility to upload a file at the minute from M365 Copilot back to your backend. That's still a work in progress there. Okay. Last but not the least, there was the licensing thing. You covered it regarding the cost.
Yes, and there is a reference in the README and also a screenshot. So I think that's clear now. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Back to our slides. Poof, poof, poof. Whoop. If I can present my PowerPoint, that should do it. Boom. Good. So I did demonstrate, but we have a dedicated slide for the skill. So as I was mentioning in the presentation, the skill is built for 4 pillars. The architecture and the principles. So being able to answer questions around the architecture, I showed you as well, it was knowledgeable about stuff that are going beyond than the current samples that we have. It's as well give you the principles and will warn you if you're going to a place, you know, that's against what we built. It's not going to block you, but remind you that, you know, we built it with security in mind, and putting a static API key is kind of going backward. It will as well explain you what are the boundaries, what you should edit, what not edit in the sample to keep the proxy alive, but as well edit it and adapt it to your existing AI agent architecture. It will help you as well understand the config wiring, what are the different files, where are the variables stored, and how the deployment is going. And obviously, if you need to break down that deployment to more granular actions, because you're working into an enterprise and you can't have a single admin that can run every script. Obviously, it will definitely help you to do that. And it will as well help you into how to clone, how to deploy, how to use the F5 and provision, thanks to the agent toolkit we were mentioning. So everything you need to start today. So in the deck that we'll share a bit later down, you'll find the link to the 3 repo, one for C#, one for Node.js, and one to Python. They're all on parity feature-wise. They don't support yet file upload, but definitely it's happening on our side, not on the proxy agent side, but on the M365 Copilot side, because we're waiting for the feature. We have a video walkthrough that we recorded a few times ago. And we have the Copilot skill, which is at the minute only available in Node.js. It's not yet in the repo on the left side, but in a merge, a pull request. So I put the pull request link for the time being. And hopefully very quickly, we'll update the C# and the Python to get the skills there as well. So as we're wrapping up, a few things to remember. First, that sample is really backend agnostic. While we use AI Foundry or Microsoft Foundry for the demonstration purpose or the sample ease of deployment, it can be adapted to any other technology there. Okay, it was built with no secret in mind. That means that when you publish the code in Azure, we use managed identity. So there is no app ID and app secrets to be configured, stored securely, and managed. It uses federated credentials, which is as well another technology to enable to have the SSO flow without having to have a client ID, client secret. So it's simpler in terms of management and supportability of this solution. It's everything, most of the value for the Node.js version is on the agent TS file, but very similar on the C# and the Python version. It's one file that handles most of the code. Okay, and it's important to look at the pitfalls, which are token caching, the streaming, and the manifest configuration. Everything is covered in the docs. So we do have a README file plus a few deployment files that explain you what's going on in if you deploy in local or in Azure. And if, like me, you're lazy and you don't want to read very long MD file, you have the skill that will help you digest that and only get the meaningful information out of that.